Kill the Trap. Welcome back, 2021, and I got a special episode for you guys. As you can tell by that amazing intro and the title, we are going to be building the Zero. We're going to try doing a one-day build, so I'm going to try doing start to finish all in this one episode. I got a lot to explain. Let's just jump right to it. Let me show you some stuff on the bike first. We're just going to dive right into this episode. It's going to be a lot really cool. If you enjoyed that intro, give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button. Let's begin. Alright, so what we got here is a 2009 Zero MX. This was Zero's first attempt at making a motocross focused only bike, and it's pretty crazy what they did for 2009. This thing is ultra light. I mean, like super light. Like if you were to take the motor and stuff out of it, the frame was advertised to weigh a whopping like 14 pounds, which is insane. The amount of engineering in this bike is pretty cool, especially for its time. It does have White Brother forks on it. They're kind of like a hybrid of a super heavy duty downhill mountain bike fork mixed with a motocross fork. Again, to save the weight, I'm sure they chose these over straight up motocross forks because the bike doesn't weigh a lot to begin with, so you don't need crazy suspension. For a rear suspension, we got a Fast Ace coilover shock, a massive 72 tooth sprocket. It's got a brushed DC motor in it, which is one of the things we're going to replace. But the main thing with these bikes is you can find them cheap nowadays because most of them are going to have dead batteries in them. Zero did have a problem with these bikes even back in the day. If you didn't charge your battery once a month, the batteries were known to just fail. And they cost like $2,700 or something like that. So people weren't really replacing them. So you could find these with dead batteries. This one has no battery. But it's honestly perfect to do builds with, because you have this awesome platform to begin with. It's not like you're starting from scratch. The original battery was 48 volts and it used to pump like 300 amps. This thing was like a little rocket ship for back in its day. But my game plan in this episode is to make it run on the Greenworks 80 volts. We're going to try shoving 6 of these into this compartment. And you kind of got the idea. Alright, so before we do anything else with the bike, let me show you what I have for replacement power. Now, before we mount this to the bike, I am going to hook this all up on the table. And we are going to bench test this controller and motor with the batteries for 2 reasons. One is I have yet to see anyone else run a Golden Motor controller with their Energy motor. So it's me from the future. I don't want to be putting false information out there, so there might be a reason why no one's done this before, but just keep watching the video, you'll see what happens. Alright, let's go back. So I figured why not just document it. And second is I just want to make sure everything works before we just slap it on the bike and have to deal with it then. So for a motor, we have the Mote Energy ME0907 brushless DC motor. Hopefully these mounting holes are close to the same spot of those mounting holes, so we don't have to do too much modification, but we're just gonna cross our fingers on that. Like I said before, we're using the Golden Motor Vector 500 controller. This is their 10 kW controller, but we're gonna limit it down for this setup. For a twist throttle, we got the Magura twist throttle, the electric one. I'm gonna use this one for the bench test, but believe it or not, the one that's on the bike right now is the same throttle, so it's gonna be the same thing. here's our piggy tail harness for the controller. We got phase wires, throttle, and some other plugs. I'm going to show you guys all that, don't worry. Key switch with an inline fuse. Those are our Greenwork 80-volt batteries. For the bench test, we are going to use the battery box out of the go-kart. This way we can power the controller. It's already pre-made. But we are going to make a custom battery box to fit in this compartment on the Zero. So if this all works on the table, we'll knock out a battery box and we'll have hopefully the Zero up and running. But let's sit down and let me take you step by step on how to hook up the Golden motor with the Mote Energy motor. So now, when you buy this controller brand new from Golden Motor, they come with this harness. When it's new, it comes with ends on all the wires, and they're all pre-labeled. I've cut these because this harness has been through a lot, but this is your forwards, reverse, this is cruise control, this is regen braking, this is throttle, these three. The white one is temp sensor, this is your on-off switch, and these are going to be our Hall effect sensors. Now, as far as hooking up this controller to the Mote Energy motor, the hardest thing is figuring out the difference in color for the Hall effect sensor, which I already know, so I'm going to tell you this now. If you're doing this combo, just write this down. The black and red are your power to go to your Hall effect sensor. So black and red is going to go with the black and red on your Mote Energy motor. The difference comes when you're plugging in the colored wires. You're going to have a yellow, a green, and a blue coming from the controller. And coming from the motor, you're going to have a white, a green, and a blue. Now, I already know for a fact that the yellow is going to go to blue, the green is going to go to green, and the blue is going to go to white. So if you're doing this setup, write that down. That's going to be the hardest part to hooking this up. Alright, so it's me from the future one more time. Now, that was a really big claim that I just said. Now, I already know for a fact, and I said that with the utmost confidence because if you follow me on Instagram, Chris Uno, a couple of days ago, I actually uploaded a video to my story of this system working. So like this literally took 2 days, but we have a working motor for the Zero. This thing is gonna be upgraded. Video coming soon. Oh, I'm done. Let's go to bed. I did hook this all up at one time and I got it to work. Now, from the time I had it working then to now, something happened and we'll just figure it out together. Just keep watching the video. But that's what I meant by I don't want to be putting false information up there because there's no really way of me saying this 100% works, even though I did have it working. But I just don't want to mislead you guys. But keep watching the video. We'll get it all sorted and figured out. But other than that, everything else is just plug and play. So now that we got that covered, I gotta make cables for our phase wires. So we're gonna make crimped ends on the end of these cables. This is gonna go to our UWV on the motor, and on the controller itself it's labeled UVW, so just make those match the controller ones. I'm just gonna throw on a time lapse. Let's make these cables, let's wire this up, and we'll come back to the key switch right after. So let's do that. So now let's just hook it all up. So like I said before, the phase wires are going to be labeled. We'll make this one the U, W, and V. Alright, so that covers the phase wires. Now we're going to throw our pigtail harness onto the controller. These are going to be our Hall effect wires. We'll plug that in. So that pretty much covers the motor except for the temp sensor, but we'll get right to that after. So for the next step, we're going to hook up our power cables to the controller. Like I said earlier, we're going to use the battery box out of the go-kart just for the bench test. We're going to put the Greenworks in here. But before we plug that in, let's just hook up the positive and negative to the controller. So that's going to be your positive, which is also going to incorporate the key switch too. So on your fuse line, you're going to steal your power from the battery directly from the positive. The other lead coming from the key switch is going to go to the pink wire coming out of the controller, which is going to be your electric key switch. So we got power, we got the switch, we got the Hall sensors, we got the motor hooked up. The only thing left is going to be the throttle, which are going to be these three wires. So let's just wire that up real quick. Alright, so now that we got the throttle and the switch wired in, all we got left is to put the batteries into the battery box and plug in this massive Anderson plug. And let's see it come to life. Alright. We'll take our key. We got a beep. That's a good sign. No excessive beeping. If you get multiple beeps out of this controller, that means you have something wired up wrong. Let's see what it does. Kidding me? Alright, so now you're caught up to future me. Let me explain what's happening. Like you just heard, this thing is beeping excessive amount of times, which means there's a problem. To be exact, what problem? Let me show you. When we turn the controller on, it begins to beep and flash. Now let it do its thing. If you count the beeps in the flash, it's going to give you a code. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're getting 5 beeps. What the 5 beeps mean is there's a problem with the Hall effect sensor, either the wiring or inside the motor. I ripped the wiring apart to make sure I didn't wire something wrong, and I wired it exactly the same as that video from my Instagram of this setup working. So the wiring was right. So what's left? Let's test the Hall effect sensor inside the motor. And this is pretty easy to do. If we take a voltmeter, put it on volts, DC volts, get your range right. Inside the motor, the Hall effect sensor is actually pretty simple. What it is your power and your negative coming from the controller is going to power up the sensor, and then these three are just signal wires. So as the motor turns, the magnetic field trips the Hall effect sensors, and it just gives you readings coming out of the signal wires. Now the Golden motor controller works off a 5-volt system. What I've seen online, these ME0907 motors, I guess there's a range. It can go from 10 volts, but it still could work at 5 volts. It definitely worked at 5 volts because I had it working in the video. So to begin with, we're going to power up the controller one more time. So we're going to steal the power. I'm going to put this cap on it and shove that in there. So we'll go to the white leg. We got 4 volts. As we spin it, it's not going to 0. So that's a problem with the white leg on the Hall effect sensor. Let's check the blue leg. We got 4.98, 0. And then it goes back to 4, then to 0. So in theory, those numbers aren't perfect, but that blue leg is working. Let's check the green. We're already at 0.20. And it's only going up to 2 volts. So there's a problem there also. Now, what caused that problem? I'm not 100% sure, but my hunch is if this 12 volt power wire touches any of these, it could possibly short out the Hall effect sensor inside the motor. Did that happen? I don't know. Was I super careful for that not to happen? I tried my best. The only possible time where I think that might have happened is when I was taking it all back apart after I had it running that day I took that video on Instagram. So from here on out, this motor has a bad Hall effect sensor inside of it. It's not going to work. I'm going to try to buy a new one and replace it, but that leaves us with what to do in this video. We're like 18 minutes into this video and we're basically starting from 0 again. We got 2 options. I can either give up, quit, and call it an end to this, or I can take the motor out of the electric pit bike that we are building, which is the golden motor 5 kW, and I'll just put it in the 0 for now. Now that doesn't mean that I'm gonna give up on the electric pit bike. By no means. We are gonna continue that. The next video we're going right back to it. But this motor's been passed around through all my projects. These motors are very expensive. I only bought, well, now I got 2, but actually I got 3. No, I got 4 now. 2 of them are brushed. These are my only brushless motors. So I just reuse the motors on all my different projects, and I basically get them to rolling chassis to the point where I can just drop this motor and the controller into any of the frames, and I have a working electric bike. And since they all run on the Greenworks, they all use the same batteries also. So why not just make the 0 another one of them? So let's just continue, but with this motor instead. Now the downside of using this motor is I already know for a fact the mounting holes on this motor is not like this motor, and I know the mounting plate that's in the 0 is not like this one. It's the same as this one, so I'm gonna have to make a custom motor mount. But since I basically showed you how to wire up this motor and it's almost the same as this motor, if anything, this motor is even easier because it's direct plug and play with the controller. There's really, I also have videos of me how to hook up this motor. If you want to watch those, I'll put the link in the description below. But we're going to skip hooking this motor up and bench testing it because I already know it works. It's a good motor. So we're just going to jump to making the motor mount for the 0, and we'll get making to the battery box. And we'll keep the video rolling. I mean, what am I just going to throw out 17, 18 minutes of video that I did already? So that's not happening. So here's my motor mount. What we got going on here is a huge cutout in the back, and then this square piece in the front, a rectangle I should say. I didn't really measure anything, but it does fit really nicely on the bike, and it's able to slide. But the reason for these weird cuts like that are because the Golden motor has got this sticking out circle, and this just perfectly fits like that. So now that we got this made, we can permanently mount this into the bike, and we're done with the motor mount, and we're going to start making the battery box. Now this I'm going to take you a little more step by step, just because so many of you have questions every time I make these battery boxes. So I'm going to show you exactly how I make it and not do a montage like this. But let's get to the battery box and mount this permanently. So Greenwork Battery Box 101. This is actually going to be pretty easy because, believe it or not, Zero planned for this back in the day. The batteries are the perfect size to fit 3 across the bottom, just like so, and there's enough room to put the other 3 on top. I'm just kidding about Zero planning this out, but it just so happened to work like that. So keeping them together is going to be the easy part, but the challenging part is how do you get the power out from the back of these batteries? And for that, a little trip to Home Depot, and I found these copper tube straps. Now you got to watch out because they make these in real copper, and then they make these in a steel copper coated version. I recommend you getting the real copper ones. But what we're going to do is stretch these open, hit them with a hammer, make them flat, use the cutting shears, cut them to the right size. And now we're going to solder the wires to the little copper pieces that we just made. You want to take your time here. You don't want any cold solder joints. So what I find is the copper actually takes a while to heat up. So putting a plastic insulator in your
and then it
bikes
leaves us
actually
with
helps
all
a
this.
lot with keeping the heat in the copper
So
itself.
these are going to be our
and the solder
positive, these
joints.
are going to be our negative. When these are connected to the back of the battery, you do not want these to touch. If they touch, it's going to spark, arc, and weld. Bad things are going to happen. So to keep that from happening, I have this white board. This is the same board I used on my electric go-kart battery box. And what's going to happen is these little tabs are just going to slide into the board. Got your positive. And we got our negative. Once I slide them into the slots, now we have a way for the battery to just plug right in. It's really that easy. Just going to duplicate that on all these. And to keep them mounted to the whiteboard, what I have is these little holes. Going to take these little tiny self-tapper screws and just send them through those holes. And that should just keep everything in place. So let's do that fast, and it should look like this. So we got all our copper little plugs on that side and all our wires in the back. Alright, we're getting there. I'm just going to mount this thing into the Zero box, and we should be able to put all this into the bike. Let's start putting everything together. This video is getting long. Montage. this bike's been on the floor more than any other bike's ever been. Alright, I had to get away from the gas bikes over there because, you know, they're making so much noise. But let's take it on the street. So just to get an understanding of how quiet it is, here, ready? Listen. So, what's my honest opinion about this bike that I just built? Well, I think I'm trying to compare apples to oranges, if you know what I mean, because basically what I'm riding is a glorified mountain bike. This is not a dirt bike, and I feel like my expectations are for something like a 450 or 250, something powerful and big, and that's just not what this is. This is a glorified mountain bike. So with that being said, it's fast. The acceleration is a little weak. I wish it was harder, but for what it is, it's probably gonna be really good on the dirt. And it works. It's just a working zero. I mean, I don't know what else to expect. So with that being said, that's it for this episode. We're going right back to building the pit bike. I might make some changes to that, but I'll see you guys then, all right? Like, subscribe, y'all, if you like it. All right, peace.